Hey, yo, salute to all my subscribers. Special shout out to everybody else passing through. Salute to the YouTube viewership and all my listeners on iTunes, Google Play, and Spotify. For those of you who are listening on my podcast platform, you are now tuned into the LREIB podcast. So, welcome back. Um, I came through to talk a little bit about forgiveness. There's I guess it's a saying, but it's more of a kind of a moniker. The saying goes, you don't forgive the person who committed some kind of an act or transgression against you. You don't do it for them, but you forgive them for you, so that you don't carry that negative energy, so that you don't have to, um, deal with um, whatever negative energy or bad karma, or you don't have that weight on you from holding a grudge against someone, or what have you. I think it's bullshit. That's just my personal opinion. I think whatever somebody needs to get through, whatever somebody needs to do to get through their life, whatever philosophies you need to adopt, however you need to structure your um, mind frame in order to be able to navigate through this thing called life that we all try to figure out from day to day. Do that, but at the same time, understand that there are so many contradictions between what society tells us we need to do and how we need to be in our personal dealings with people and our relationships that we interact with from day to day. There's a difference from how we're told to interact in those situations from how society treats us as individuals. And when I say society, I mean other people as a whole, the infrastructure, the system, and I'm going to draw those parallels in a second. Most people say that life is short. That's the general consensus. Live your life right because life is short. Treat people how you want them to treat you. Be kind, be forgiving. Show people that you trust them. All of these cookie cutter things that we are told that we need to be in order to be most presentable, most accepted, in our circles and in the people that we come into contact with. But that's not really how it is. Anybody who really looks at things from a real perspective, and anybody who, classifies themselves like I do as a realist, knows that life is not short. It may be short as you're looking back on it after it's already passed and said and done. When you look back on situations, like you look back on your childhood, yeah, it seems like it was just yesterday because your memory doesn't span that full period of time. But when you're living in those moments and you're conscious of those moments and you're actually aware of the minutes and the hours and the days as they're passing, especially in those moments that are not ideal, especially in those moments that are painful, life is very monotonous, very mundane. There are more painful moments than there are enjoyable moments. You spend more time, the average person, you spend more time waiting for something enjoyable, something pleasurable, something exciting to happen than you actually spend in and during those moments. That's not a cynical look. That's not, me having that jaded perspective because of my experiences. That's just life. That's just the way that it is. You will always spend more time in preparation for something than you will actually spend on that something when that something is actually in that moment. Um, so having said that, right, I'm not a person who is an angry person. I'm not a person who is um, necessarily resentful, or I'm not a person who necessarily holds grudges, depending on how you define grudges and what that looks like to you. I'm a person who gives everyone a fair chance. I'm a person who can be the nicest, sweetest person, when you meet me and interact with me, and then depending on your dealings with me throughout the course of that interaction, however long or short that interaction lasts for. If that is a relation if that turns into a relationship of multiple interactions over the span of months and years, or if that's just, you know, an interaction here or there, in certain environments, I always, and I pride myself on this, I give people the energy that they give me. How a person treats me is exactly what I show them in return. Anyone who's ever been in my circle, been a part of my life, anyone who has ever been in a relationship with me, whether that relationship be a platonic relationship or a romantically charged relationship, if that person is being honest, you run across that person on the street somewhere and you ask them what kind of person I am, um, they would be lying if they didn't say that I was an individual who was the best person to them. And if they had something to say that was negative, as far as something that is being accused that I did to them, or a way that I treated them, or, you know, how I dealt with them or spoke to them, if any of those things are negative and that person's honest, then the next question should be, what was that in what was that in response to? Was there something that was being reciprocated that you put forward first? And if they're an honest person, they would have to answer yes, and then hopefully explain what that situation was. Because I'm not a way to anybody who's not a way to me. It's just how I live my life. You know, I don't subscribe to this be one way, you know, be super righteous and, you know, turn the other cheek and all these other different things. There are situations where that applies. There are moments in which it's smart to be that way. But for the most part, you know, I used to joke and say that I had multiple personalities, but not in a way that is like schizophrenic or like, you know, serial killer type, or, you know, I'm just out of it, not tuned into what's going on in life. No, just because, you know, the face that I wear, the person that I am, the energy that I give off is directly predicated on what's being projected at me. All I do, you know, you could use the analogy that I'm like a mirror. You know, whatever you show me, I'm going to show you. And I've lived my life that way. But here's why society is as equally fucked up, if we're going to look at it in a negative way. Here's why society is as equally fucked up, but yet tries to tell you and me and people like us that we need to be the opposite of how we're treated in society and everyday life. So for anyone who's ever been in any kind of relationship, anyone who's ever had a friend, you know, a sibling even for that matter, anyone who's ever been in close quarters with another human being for a long enough period of time, at some point that person is going to do something to piss you off. At some point you're going to do something to piss that person off. You're going to do something to hurt that person, and vice versa. It doesn't have to be intentional. A lot of times it's not intentional. A lot of times, you know, we do things to each other just because, you know, it's the way that we've been conditioned over time based on our experiences, our upbringing, the lessons that we were taught, because all behavior is learned. You know, I believe that a lot of what people do in relationships to hurt each other is not done intentional. Some things are, but I think the majority of the things are not. And that's why, and in my second book, Relationship Etiquette, which is coming very soon, that's why I talk about it being so important that when we get into new relationships, we have important discussions with people. We break down that internal baggage. We take that inventory of our personal baggage, and we have those conversations so that we know going into those relationships where those pressure points are. Because I think that a lot of the hurts and the resentments that result from relationships that go wrong is through no initial fault of a person. You know, we're just creatures of habit. You know, we live our lives the way that we're accustomed to living them, and we continue to stay in that cycle of habit of the things that we do from day to day, and the way that we talk and the way that we treat people. And until you come across someone who's willing to break through those things and have those conversations with you so that you can become conscious of those things, then we continue to do that. You know, we hurt people along the way just being in our own way. And until you're made aware that you're doing something wrong, you can't necessarily be faulted. But here's where the forgiveness part comes in. Forgiveness is tied to trust in a way. It's tied to, willingness to, um, in your committed relationship, it's tied to being willing to compromise, not like compromise on, you know, chores or things like that. It's about compromising feelings, emotions, compromising, your willingness to be tolerant of a person's kind of hang-ups or their shortcomings, and vice versa. That's what relationships are all about. It's about compromise, commitment, all these different things. The normal cookie cutter things that we all hear, that will help a relationship be successful. Forgiveness, though, is tricky, because most people will tell you, if they're honest, that in a relationship, if they were done wrong, that they, if it was something that somebody would consider to be a deal breaker, like if someone cheats on a person, or if someone, I don't know, steals from them, or, whatever, and they do that thing, most people will tell you, oh, if I'm in a committed relationship, if I'm in a marriage, I'm going to try to forgive that person, because that's what relationships are all about, and it's better to try and forgive someone for something and try and work it out, because people make mistakes and no one's perfect. Heard you. Here's the problem. No one's perfect, correct. People make mistakes, correct. The issue with mistakes as it pertains to forgiveness is, and not the issue with mistakes, but the difference between what a mistake is and what a person's perception of what a mistake is pertaining to forgiveness is off base. If I'm in a dark room, or crowded elevator, or a crowded subway car on a train, and I bump into someone, or I step on someone's shoe, and I say, you know what, I apologize, that was a mistake, I didn't see you there, I didn't mean to do that. That fits the dictionary's definition of what a mistake is. Something that is unintentional and unforeseen having occurred. That's a mistake. And I understand we live in a society where words have meanings, but people apply different meanings to words, and we treat words more like figures of speech rather than using them as what they're meant to be used as for their dictionary definition. But that's my problem as a realist. That's my problem as being someone who sees things for what the fuck they are, what the fuck they mean, and who calls people out on their shit. And this is why a lot of my relationships don't pan out, because I call people on their shit, because I'm a literal person, and in a lot of cases you need to be literal. Things mean what they mean, things are what they are, and when you start to stray too far from those different things, you start to get into murky waters. So here's why I mentioned mistake, and I gave an example of what an actual occurrence of a mistake would look like. So you're in a relationship now, after we already discussed what a mistake is. You're in a relationship now with someone, and they cheat on you. And some time goes by, you find out about the cheating, you have a discussion about it, and they say, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to hurt you, I made a mistake, I apologize, can we work it out? Whatever the conversation, the typical thing that happens when someone gets caught cheating. Different people have different tolerance levels when it comes to these types of things. Never classify cheating as a mistake. It's not a mistake, and it's unforgivable. It's unforgivable. The reason why it's not a mistake is for a couple reasons. It's not a mistake because, one, someone cheating does not just happen. I don't care that some people narrate situations differently, and they say, well, you could be at a party somewhere, and someone starts drinking, and then they're inebriated, and then you really aren't in control of your actions. I don't care. I don't care what happens at point C, D, or E. In order to get from point A to point C or D or F or G or wherever that endpoint is, first there had to be a thought. If you're in a relationship, a committed relationship with someone, guy or girl, male or female, whatever, and you're supposed to be home because that's where your partner thinks you are. You know, they're at work, you guys work two different times of the day. Let's say they work nights and you work days, and or you work nights and they work days, and you're at work at night, and then they're going out to a party, and they end up drinking, getting drunk, and then something happens that shouldn't have happened. That's not a mistake. If you were not told that this person was going to be going out to this party, there was no expectation that they were going to be going out to this party, they didn't tell you because they knew that they shouldn't have been going, because whoever they were going to be going with or meeting up with or going to be involved with there, they knew would cause strain on the relationship because they're being dishonest. This is the situation. They're moving around behind your back in ways that you don't know and that you would have an issue with if you knew, that they would have an issue with if you were doing it to them. And then they end up drunk at this party, and they end up, you know, doing something with the person that they shouldn't have been doing. That's not a mistake. Your conscious decision to move however you decided to move through that relationship, and those moments that led up to you making the conscious decision to leave the house in the middle of the night while your partner was at work, not tell them you were leaving the house, not tell them you were going to a party. Look, I'm of the belief that if something is innocent and you have no reason to hide it or lie about it because you're not doing anything wrong, then why hide it or lie about it? If you feel as an adult that you need to hide or lie about something as an adult, then it's because you know that what you're about to do, even if you don't feel like it's wrong, because you might not have immediate intentions on being unfaithful in your relationship, if you know that your partner looks at it as wrong, and if you guys go back on my YouTube channel, back down the list of all the videos and blogs, I talked about this. Cheating is defined by the person in the relationship who feels that they've been cheated on. I'll repeat that. And this topic is not about cheating, but it ties in. And I'll repeat it. Cheating is defined by the person in the relationship who feels like they've been cheated on. So it's not your call to decide if we're in a committed relationship, if we're married, if we're living together, what have you. If you're doing things that you think I might have an issue with, and you do those things anyway without that communication, that common courtesy, that reaching out to me, that showing me that, look, you have equal respect for the relationship, then you're wrong already. And so whatever comes out of those initial decisions that were conscious decisions on that person's part, whatever happens past that, you're automatically wrong. People would disagree with me. Hold on. People would disagree with me. People would say, well, you know, there's relationships when people go out separately and they hang out, whatever. Yeah, that's true. And that's perfectly fine. And if that's what the understanding is in your relationship, that you're going to go out separately and hang out and have a girl's night out or a guy's night out, you know, whatever the case, that's something that's communicated, though. I'm not talking about you being in a relationship and not being able to go out. I'm talking about the communication part. Let's say there was communication. You go out with someone and, you know, you're together in a relationship, but there's a girl's night out and you go out with your friends. And let's say you're out at a club or out at a bar with your friends, and let's say you meet someone there. What's the situation where you could possibly get drunk enough to end up alone with that person in order for something to happen that shouldn't have happened? Let's take it a step further and be a little bit more realistic. You meet someone and for some reason you get their phone number, or they get yours, or you exchange social media contact because you know you might be going through a rift in your relationship, or you know there might be hard times in your marriage that you took vows to see through, but now that you're in this moment, you think it's harmless to exchange contact information with this person, and now you're dealing with this person, you're talking to this person, and then as time goes on, you end up in a situation where you decide to be alone with that person because you got into an argument with your husband or boyfriend or wife or whatever, and now you're hanging out with this person. One thing leads to another and something happens. That's not a mistake. That's not a mistake. Something that is not a mistake, in my opinion, cannot be forgivable. A mistake is something, again, that is unintended and that was unforeseen. You might have the argument, if you get caught cheating on your partner, that You didn't mean to physically cheat on them, but by you exchanging contact information with that stranger, by you initiating contact ongoing and having, for all intents and purposes, a separate relationship with that person, knowing that at some point you were or are going to be in a vulnerable state, that there's a possibility that there could be a point in time where you could be in a vulnerable enough state with your partner that you're going to be tempted to go to this other person, and something happens. That's not a mistake. You made that conscious decision. Now, I'm not saying that people can't have friends or shouldn't have friends in a relationship, and maybe certain people would think I'm off base for saying this, but as a married individual, I'm a strong, I might take some flack for this, but I'm a married individual, so I look at relationships a little bit differently when you're married. But I believe this, and I even feel this way about long-term committed relationships. If you're in a long-term live-in situation, there's a certain amount of respect that should be demanded. You live with another person, you need to be respectful of that living space. Coming home at all hours of the day and night, coming and going as you please all times of the day and night, just because you're adults, not respectful, especially when you're married. If whatever friends you have going into that relationship, there should not, it's a red flag in my opinion. Like, if I have friends who are the opposite sex prior to meeting my partner, prior to getting into that committed relationship, prior to getting into that marriage, what have you, that's fine. It's a different thing. Those friends, those people already existed there prior to. The frequency of my interactions and dealings with them, obviously they're going to change, or the frequency will become less frequent that I will speak to and communicate with those people just over time, just because the relationships are hard work, especially living relationships and marriages. That takes a lot of effort, time, energy, and all those different things. I think that if you're the friends that you have prior to that committed relationship, that marriage, whatever, there's no foul in that. Any friends of I'm speaking of friends of the opposite sex, obviously. If you're being introduced to or are making new friends after that relationship, or like during that relationship, and they're of the opposite sex, and they're not friends that you're willing to, or not people that you're willing to introduce an open space to your partner and only be around or in communication with around your partner, then you have something to hide. There's something there that is not copacetic. I don't feel like, I feel like anything that happens during the course of a relationship that you can't include your partner on, then that should be a red flag. And the reason why I'm tying these things into forgiveness is because it all comes full circle. A lot of times you have to paint a picture for people to really be able to understand why something is the way it is. If I'm going to have a philosophy on something, if I'm going to have an idea or concept about why I choose to live by some code or another, there needs to be supporting facts and reasons for why. That's just the way that I operate. And so people, vice versa, who people in turn who have ideals, have concepts, have philosophies on different things, but they don't have anything to support those things, I have a hard time getting behind them or understanding them. So that's why I'm painting this picture that all ties into forgiveness. So everything that I just said, all the examples that I just laid out, right? If those things are happening, and then the result, or the end result, or the end occurrence is some kind of a transgression against that other partner, then you cannot classify that as a mistake, in my opinion. You can't. I say my opinion because Perception is reality, and I talk about this in the first chapter of my first book, 365 Days to Seasonal Change. My perception is my reality. So if you're in a relationship with me, these are the things that govern my way of thinking. So when I'm going through the different things and it's time for us then to sit down and have a discussion about something that you did that could potentially hurt the relationship, these are the guidelines that I'm following, that I'm going by. And of course, there's no issue ever, in my opinion, with a person's rules for the relationship or guidelines for how they feel like they want to be treated in the relationship, ever. As long as you are willing to give the same treatment to someone that you expect for yourself. Anything that I demand for me in a relationship, anything that I would not settle for, anything that I would not tolerate, I wouldn't do to the next person. The only time I'm ever gonna, like I said, I only give people the energy they give me. The only time I'm gonna do anything that goes against any of my standards, morals, what have you, is if it's in defense of something that's being done to me. Because there's time and place, and there's a certain point where, you know, as human beings, you just want to get even with someone for something they do to you. You know, it is what it is. We're not perfect people. You know, we're all flawed creatures. You know, that's one of my hang-ups. It is what it is. I'm overall a forgiving person, you know, by nature, but forgiving when it's reasonable and forgiving when it makes sense. Outside of that, you do me wrong, you're going to have an issue. And that's just the way it is. So let's tie it all together now. So you go to apply for a job. We're getting to the part now of forgiveness and why it's bullshit that you need to be super forgiving of people. So we talked about the relationships. We talked about how people who claim that things like cheating is a mistake and it's not. We got that part out of the way. So we know what a mistake is, right? A mistake is not something that you did that was foreseeable, that could have been avoided, or that was a conscious decision. Those are not mistakes. Call them something else. You know, say you fucked up, say you did something wrong, you know, apologize for it. Don't say it was a mistake, because how I'm classifying a mistake and how I define mistake, that type of thing is not going to fly with me. That will set me off. If I'm already pissed off because someone cheated on me and then they're going to say on top of that it was a mistake, well, now I'm going to be pissed off. So we got that out of the way. So you go to apply for a job. This is why forgiveness is bullshit, and this is why if it's not going to apply in society, it shouldn't apply in our personal relationships. It's you can't have it both ways. If society is going to tell us, and if people are going to tell us that we need to be trusting and forgiving of each other in our personal relationships to one another, then at the same time, people in general and society conditions us to see, know, and believe that that's not the case, because we're not being afforded that same privilege. Then why should we continue to adopt that moniker or that standard in our personal relationships? It doesn't make any sense. Example. You apply for a job. On that job application, there are multiple things that should tell anyone, because see, this is what I do. I hate to keep pausing, but I have to make sure the correlation is there and the correlation is strong. How my mind works is, the more, when I look at a situation or I look at something, anything, I look for other things that connect back to that thing. Because the more things connect and the more things become interchangeable with other things, that's where I get my best overall picture of if things make sense, if concepts make sense, if laws make sense, if, you know, religious views make sense, political views make sense, whatever it is. There are multiple things on a job application that you can directly relate to forgiveness and relationships and trust and all these other different things. The first thing on a job application typically after you put all your personal information in, right? Because companies need to know who the hell's applying for this job. Usually immediately after that is work experience, right? On most job applications. Tell us why. Tell us what you have done in your past that would warrant us wanting to give you an opportunity. What are your qualifications? What have you done in the way of experience that tells us that you would be able to do this job, right? So you have to fill in all your work history, whatever points relate back to this job that you're applying for. Hold on. So then after that's done, then usually it's sometimes the two interchange. Sometimes you'll see job history first. Sometimes you'll see education history first, then second. Sometimes you see the two flip flop depending on the company. Your education history, right? Let's say this job that you're looking to do is in a specialty field. Let's say, I don't know. Let's say it's nursing. I don't know. What school? What degree level did you attain? What certifications do you have that would qualify you to be able to do this job, that would allow us to hire you, right? So now you have to able to prove, one, your experience in this field, and then two, whatever preferred and or required credentials you may have that would even allow us to hire you, right? Once you get past all that, then there is, depending on the company, depending on what field you're in, there are two other things that you're asked that really drive home to me, and that are really the main point that shows me that society conditions us to know that there is no such thing as forgiveness and or trust. So some companies, depending on the field, will then ask you for your consent for them to do a consumer report. Consumer report is most closely related to like a credit check. Certain companies, depending on what your position in those companies would potentially be, these companies want to know what your credit score is, what your credit history is, these types of things, because certain high-level positions in certain companies where you have access to finances, check writing, credit card information, what have you. The belief is that if you're under a high stress situation at home with your personal finances, that you could be more tempted to embezzle or steal from a company. Hey, who am I to say that that's wrong? Companies have to protect their assets. Companies have insurance to think about. Corporations have shareholders and other people to answer to, and it's no problem. Protect your company, do what you feel you need to do. Fine. The other question that you will be asked on that application is, have you ever been convicted of or pled guilty to a misdemeanor and or a felony? Right? Usually these things will exclude traffic violations, and usually they exclude simple assault, right? Simple assault, two people got into a bar fight or something crazy like that. Nobody really got hurt, no issue. Those things are considered misdemeanors, and typically most companies are not going to, depending on how long ago they happened, usually it's just the felonies that companies are really worried about. But here's my thing, and depending on the company, they're going to either go back 2, 5, 7, or 10 years, depending on the company. Now, if this is a government type of job, or this is a state position, or something where you're dealing with a state agency or having access to state agency systems or information, then they're gonna fucking go back to the day you were born. No way really to avoid that. Here's my problem, and I touched on this too in a previous episode on my podcast, a previous topic, when I talked about the criminal justice system. Dealing with the people who, okay, it's clear that they have convictions. How long are they going to be punished for that? So I touched on that part. We'll tie that into forgiveness as well. Um, how is it that everything that you would need to be able to do in society, you need to work because you need to be able to support yourself financially? Outside of those people who are fortunate enough to have been born with a silver spoon in their mouths and don't have to work, which is less than 1% of the population. The vast, vast majority of us need to work every day in order to be able to sustain ourselves and support our families. Um, Outside of that, it baffles my mind that everything in life that we need to do, right? You live in an area where you have to commute 30 minutes to an hour to work and there's no public transportation. More rural areas, you have to have a car. You go into a car dealership to get a car, you can look at any car you want, you can pick all the options you want, the colors, leather seats, whatever you want to have, but you will not get the keys to that car unless you have, again, a fortunate enough situation where you can pay cash for that car. You have to go to a bank or a credit union in order to get a loan for that vehicle, right? Usually you go through the dealership. Some people go through their own financial institutions that they do their banking with. But again, that bank is going to look at your credit history. They want to know what your credit score is. They want to know what your history of paying your financial obligations are. Why? Because they're taking a risk and loaning you money. They want to know that their investment, even though they're going to be making money in interest on you paying that loan back, they want to limit that risk as much as possible. Because if you just decide to stop paying and you take off with that car, majority of states, it's not like they can just say, oh, you stole that car, they can report it stolen and you get arrested, because possession is 9/10 of the law. There's processes that these banks and lien holders have to go through in order to reacquire, reprocure their collateral once you default on a loan. And that's a whole different thing. Um, and so and sometimes these financial institutions are chasing people for months and years before they get their collateral back. And then a lot of times when they get their collateral back, it's not in any shape that will allow them to recoup what they've lost on it. So these banks and financial institutions are very strict on, certain thresholds for credit scores and what they'll allow for, reasonable, decent history of you paying back your financial obligations. Prove to us that you pay your obligations, that you get loans, you make these agreements, and you fulfill these agreements in a timely manner. Because that's important too. Not just that you fulfill your obligations, but that you've done so in a timely manner. And then also, you have the issue of some banks will say, okay, you haven't necessarily fulfilled all your obligations in a timely manner, but the majority of them you did. You had a few late payments, or you slipped up a few times. Your score isn't as high as we would like it to be, or you just don't have enough history at all. So we need some collateral from you before we give you the money to get this other collateral that we may at some point need to take back if you default. So you may be asked to put down, let's say, $5,000 on a $15,000 car, $20,000 car. I don't know, whatever. Again, that's that financial institution wanting you to have something to lose in that situation that will tell them you're more likely to fulfill that obligation, to the agreement, that whatever is reached, agreement is reached in that contract. So again, everything in society, everything in life, everything that we use to help make our lives easier, to help get through life, has to do with give and take, has to do with proving your credentials, that you are who you say you are, that you'll keep your word and do what you say you'll do. And that is based on past actions. That is based on what you've done before. The best way that these companies, the best way that these financial institutions, the best way that people as individuals have to judge whether or not a person will do what they say they're going to do, be how they say they're going to be, is based on their past experiences. That's all anyone or anything ever has to go by. I don't know what you will or won't do in the future because nobody can see the future. But I do know what you will or won't do, or I have a pretty good idea of what you will or won't do based on what you have or have not done in the past. It's all about pattern. You know, if you commit an act enough times, that becomes a pattern. And based on that pattern, pretty well, figure out, or it's a pretty good indication of what you may be most likely to do going forward. Why the fuck, though? Please, somebody explain to me. Why the fuck does that shit not apply? Or why are we wrong? Those of us who apply that same logic in our personal relationships. You hear things like once a cheater, always a cheater. I think that that's very logical. I think it applies. Here's the difference. Because there are levels. I don't think that a person who cheated on a partner that they were with necessarily means that they will cheat on a different partner that they may be with in the future. That, I think, just depends on the individual, and everybody reaches a point in their life where they're just done playing those games. And most people reach a point, you get old enough, you just want to settle down. Who wants to get old alone, right? But I do 100% believe that what you let a person get away with and what you set the tone for in your relationship with the current partner, people by nature or by default or by familiarity will default back to that same behavior that they know is going to be tolerated. I don't think that a person who cheats on a partner will cheat on every partner going forward, but I do 100% believe that if a person cheats on you, is unfaithful to you, and you remain in that relationship with that person out of forgiveness or out of willingness to give them another chance, I 100% believe that that person has the propensity to cheat on you again because you've already excused that behavior. And just by default, just by nature, you're always more likely to commit an offense against someone who has allowed you to get away with that offense prior. Doesn't mean that they will, but they have the propensity to do it. And so because of that, things like forgiveness, trust, those things have to be stripped away. You have to make a person who commits a transgression against you earn that position or earn that that trust again, earn that forgiveness. If you are ever really able and willing to give that to them going forward. Me personally, once a person breaks my trust, I'm done with them. There's no conversation. Now, I might stay in a relationship because there are different reasons why we get into relationships, and that's a whole nother topic too. People get into relationships for different reasons. So I may stay in the relationship. I may continue to deal with you. I may even learn to somewhat develop a little bit of trust in certain situations, a little bit of forgiveness I might be willing to extend, but it will never be the way that it was. Just because the nature of who we are, if we're logical and we apply logic to the same things that we encounter in our everyday life, as far as the system is concerned, as far as the government's concerned, as far as dealing with these companies and these financial institutions and all of these things, and like a business approach, if we approach relationships with that same business approach, then it's about negative and positive equity. It's about being able to withdraw on an account but having to have a balance in that account to do so. If that account's negative, you can't draw on that account. We need to approach our relationships in more of a business or financially geared mind state. Because I think if we start to do that, things will make more sense. Forgiveness doesn't have to be Like, if you forgive, then you're a good person, you're a righteous person, and if you don't, you're resentful and you hold grudges and you're angry and you're bitter. No, it's simple. You do something to me that shows me that you have the propensity to cause harm to me in a relationship, whether that harm is physical, mental, emotional, whatever, then I have every right to treat you going forward as if you have that same propensity to do that. It is up to you to prove to me going forward that you're not going to do that again, or that you're not that person, that you just had a slip up, or whatever the case, whatever people say. But there's no statute of limitations on that. If you default on a loan, your credit score is going to be it's going to be hit to the point. It's going to be hit so bad to the point that you will be very hard pressed to get another loan for years and years and years to come. If you commit a crime and you're convicted of that crime, you're going to have a hard time getting a decent job with a company who does a background check, because most companies will go back multiple years. It takes time, and you not continuing to commit additional transgressions in order for any institution to be willing to take a chance on you. So why in our relationships are we so open to allowing people that same access to us that they don't deserve, that they've proven that they don't deserve? Why? It's like someone does something wrong to you in a personal relationship. 2 minutes later, being facetious, 2 months later, 2 weeks later, whatever, they expect you to forgive them like nothing ever happened. That's bullshit. That's not the way that life works. It's the way I look at it is, a person who does something wrong to me, who is genuinely apologetic for it, genuinely remorseful, and they want to correct that issue, then those corrections have to be on my terms. You don't get to choose what the statute of limitations. If you want to stay in that relationship with me after you've done something that could potentially cause that relationship to end, I get to set the time period on how long it will take for you to make up for that. And understand too, and we'll get into this in another topic, probably on my YouTube channel. I'll do a blog. But that time does not move in a linear sense. That time is predicated on your actions toward you showing me that you're not continuing to be that person who's going to put the relationship in jeopardy. And that's how I'll end it. Forgiveness. Is it overrated? Is it necessary? Is it required? Is there some kind of negative energy that will follow you if you don't forgive someone for something that they did? I don't need to forgive anyone for anything. And that is not negative energy that I'm going to be carrying on with me into my other relationships. It's not negative energy I'm going to have looming over my head, causing me to be depressed or causing me to become this cynical person. Nah, fuck that. You screw me over, and I feel like, especially if I feel like you're bullshitting me on the reason for why you screwed me over, and you're not really willing to own up to what really occurred, how, why, and all these different things, then I'm not forgiving you for it. Fuck you. As far as I'm concerned, forgiveness is just like respect. It's earned. It's not given. You put a word, see, words have meanings, and the way that words look, I'm cautious of certain words. Forgive you for something you did to me. I don't owe you shit. So I'm not going to give you that forgiveness. You have to earn that. It's just like respect. If you want me to truly get over and forgive you for something you did to me, when the agreement was, because if we're in a relationship, then there's an understanding, there's an agreement that you're not going to do anything that could potentially cause that relationship to end, cause me pain, and vice versa, and you do it, forgive what? I'm not giving you shit but the door. If you want to stay in that relationship, then you need to show me. It should be called foreshowness, because I'm not giving you anything. You've already proven to me that you don't deserve whatever forgiveness you want me to give you. That's just how I feel about it. I don't know. I didn't mean to take this long, but I really had to break this down, because I think we're reaching a critical mass in today's world. It's a new world. The world's smaller. You know, with the advent of social media and the overexpansion of the internet and technology, this world is so fucking small you could fit it in your pocket. I mean, any smartphone, you know, that you can fit in your pocket, that's the world right there in your pocket. I mean, everything. You know, it people are closer. You know, we have instant access. Everything's on demand. So we really have to restructure, redefine, transmogrify the whole landscape of what relationships are, what they mean, what they look like. Because we can't keep applying, you know, it was different 50 years ago, 100 years ago. It was different, you know, how you approach relationships. It's so easy for people to get over and to get away with things and to be disloyal and to be unfaithful and all these different things that kill relationships. It's easier. So we have to change the rules. We have to change the governing laws of how we approach relationships. If we don't, then the same people who have gotten over will continue to get over. And I'm not beat for the bullshit. If you listen to this podcast, you follow my content, you think I talk a lot of shit, you're 100% correct. I talk a lot of shit because I'm passionate about the shit that I talk about. If you listen to this podcast, you follow my content, and you think I'm overly opinionated, well, you're 100% correct on that too. We all have opinions. The difference is I try to use my opinions to affect positive change. At the end of the day, I'm just a realist, like I say all the time. And I approach every situation in a commonsensical way. My logic is undeniable. And that logic is good, bad, or indifferent, right or wrong. There are few things that separate us. Oceans, borders, and culture. Outside of those few things, we're all just a part of one human race trying to find the best way in this bullshit to find out. Trying to find the best way in this bullshit to carve out a life for ourselves and the people we care about. Hey, yo, I don't pretend to know everything. I just know what I know, and I'll see y'all in the next one. Peace and love.